Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit more brief information on me. My name is Chandler Gordon. I'm a member of DMLA down in Arizona. I became a member in 2009, and I just recently became a Master Mason in Glendale Lodge number 23 and returned my proficiency. So I'm a voting member. Before you ask, not Scottish Rite yet. It's on my bucket list. If anyone knows Bob Hannon, he's going to get me a petition. So we're here to talk about Generation Z and membership in the Scottish Rite today. All in all, with all the Scottish Rite does, all Masonic organizations come back to the same basic fundamental teaching of membership. Because obviously without membership, we wouldn't be in this room today. But there are differences between how we appeal to our different generations. The same way that we presented Scottish Rite 10 years ago will not work on the people that we're trying to appeal to today because of the differences in social structures and emphasis on different things. So that's what we're going to talk about in this presentation, is how to appeal to a different new generation. I want to add that I thought that what the commander mentioned earlier today about the split between, remember the pie chart between the ritual, the caring for others, and the social, and splitting that into 3 more equal chunks was exactly spot on. And I think that's something we're going to hit on more in this presentation. As we begin, I want to emphasize open-mindedness attitude for the remainder of the presentation. I hope that some of the things that I bring up and that I talk about today kind of challenge some known beliefs that you might have about how young people like myself act. And just remember to keep an open mind, because if this is the way that the people of this generation act, if we want to appeal to them, we have to be willing to kind of change beliefs. We have to be willing to adapt and see things through their lens. So let's focus on that for the remainder of the presentation, which we're going to kind of break apart into 3 different sections. We're going to review some terminology that we need to understand to move forward into this presentation. What is Generation Z? What does that mean? And what are some terms that we're going to go over in this presentation that we'll basically define, just so we have a better understanding moving forward. We're going to talk about Generation Z specifically. We're going to break them apart as an individual generation and say, what makes this generation tick? What makes them act the way they do? How do they act in general? And then finally, we're going to tie it together just a little bit today with how our generation can be influenced to become members of Masonry and Scottish Rite specifically. So this is a 30-minute presentation, give or take. It obviously can't cover everything about this generation today, so I'll add at the outset that if anyone has any questions afterwards, I'd be more than happy to get together with anybody to go over some more basic or some more detailed tenets about this generation. So with that said, let's review some of the need-to-know scientific speech. So Generation Z is the focus of this presentation today. And by scientific terms, that's generally defined as the years from 1995 until about 2020. So we're in the dead heat of this generation right now. I was born in 1996. I'm 20 years old. I was one of the first parts of this generation. And as we can see on the number, 310,000 new members each day in the United States. This is a big chunk of people we're talking about here. Imagine if every single one of those would join a valley, right? So generally, Generation Z will generally define, when we say that, think 1995 through 2020. So now we're going to play a little game. If I could have everybody put their hands in the air. Yeah, like raise your hand. I'm going to name off some social media sites. And when I name one that you're not familiar with, I want you to lower your hand and then keep it lowered, okay? So has everyone heard of Facebook? Yeah, Facebook's pretty easy, right? Facebook is social media. What about Twitter? I haven't seen any hands go down yet. But Instagram? Okay, a couple hands go down. Snapchat? YouTube? Okay. Still doing pretty good. Vine, Tumblr, Pinterest, Vimeo, Google Hangouts. Right, okay, so you guys can lower your hands. I hope you guys saw that. We were doing pretty well there for a little while, and then all of a sudden we had all these hands go down. And that's one of the most interesting things that we have to talk about with this generation. So often it is perceived that the big 2 or the big 3, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, those are social media, right? That's what we mean when we say social media. And it's important to realize that it's not. When we say social media, we're talking about tens to hundreds of different sites that people are involved in, younger people are getting involved in. Facebook is, the way that it's been described to me, as the older people have found Facebook, the younger people have moved on. Right? So think throughout this presentation, when we say social media, we're talking about everything, so many different things. I'm not kidding. When you go into a high school, one night you go home and Instagram is the big thing. And then one day I remember walking through the front door and all of a sudden everybody had Snapchat. And they're like, "Oh, you don't have Snapchat? I've been a fan of Snapchat since before it was cool." And I was like, I don't even know what it is. So that is social media. And then this last term we'll cover very briefly before we kind of jump into Generation Z. What makes us tick is called FOMO, stands for the fear of missing out. And it is a term that we use to define the reason why kids are on social media every single day as often as they are. Does everyone remember, or does anyone define my generation as guys that just like walk around like, "Oh, I'm sorry, were you talking to me? I was on Facebook," right? So, and that is because, a lot of the reason because of that is the fear of missing out. We'll get into that here in just a second. So, all right. So, let's talk about Generation Z specifically. We are a very unique generation. And the most important part of that, I think, is because we were born in an age that never knew the world without the internet. Since I was little, as far back as I can remember, the internet has been there. How many of you guys played outside when you were kids? Yeah, I too played outside, but I did it for slightly different reasons. I played outside because it was mandated by my parents that I play outside so that I could earn my time playing games on the internet. Right? Weird. I get that. It's strange to think about, and now that I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I probably should have become more athletic and gone outside more. But kids are so involved in the internet. It's the defining trait of this generation. We live on the internet. 46% of kids my age are connected to some kind of internet device. 46% for 10 hours or more a day. You got to think that's 8 hours alone in schools alone, right? So, fun fact, my junior year of high school, we left and we were using these big things. You might remember, we call them textbooks, right? Then the next year I came back, no more textbooks, right? The school had gotten into an agreement with Apple. Everyone familiar with Apple? Yes? Every kid in the school, every single one of them got an iPad. Yeah, school issued iPad. All your textbooks were on there. All the programs you needed, most of your homework, that's all online now. And you could take that iPad home. If you lose it, you have to pay for it. That's where they made their money, by the way, because you lose it, it's like $500. But that was a transitionary period for me. So for over 8 hours a day while I was at school, every single class I was in was an iPad, was technology. I'm staring at these screens day after day after day, right? So the average for getting a smartphone has moved down to 10.3 years old, which you got to think, we're talking not even before these kids get into middle school now, 7th or 8th grade, they've got an iPhone or an Android. And this has led to a couple different kind of transitionary things. The first one being that we have become immensely good at multitasking. So it wasn't uncommon for me last year as I was in DMLA to be watching my favorite program on TV. It could be, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, anything like that. I'm doing that while I'm talking on the phone with the International Congress Secretary about something that we're working on, while I'm typing something at my laptop, and I've got ESPN scores sitting on my tablet in front of me. And somehow I'm keeping track of all of that. And it's such a strange phenomenon to be able to think about people not having that kind of capability. But I think we're going to find as we move forward into a more technological age, even what I'm able to do now will be obsolete in a couple of years with the additions of smartwatch technology, new phones, Bluetooth, that's the one I was looking for, kind of capabilities. So, and then this is another interesting thing. Statistically, 73% of people check their email, Facebook, social medias, right an hour before they get up, or after they get up. So every single morning, this is my personal daily routine. I wake up in the morning. I hit the snooze button like 3 times. And then when I finally get the courage to get out of bed, the first thing I do is I roll over and I grab my phone before I'm even out of bed in the morning, and I check my social media feeds. Because Facebook, for me, has this section called trending stories, right? And it has all the things that people across the world are talking about. Because the fear of missing out, remember we just reviewed that term, the fear of missing out hits me early in the morning. Nobody at school, no kid wants to be caught by their friend at school, and that friend says, "Did you hear about the story?" And the kid says, "No, I didn't." That's an important fear that we realize in kids our age. When we have technology and it's so easy to access, we don't want to not be the first person to know about something. We want to always be the ones that go to our friends and say, "Yeah, hey, did you hear about the story?" And then kind of enjoy that weird satisfaction we get when our friend says, "No, we haven't," and we have an opportunity to explain it to them. So that kind of explains the reason we're always on social media, because things are always happening, and we want to be the ones to see it first. So keep that in mind when we talk about technology use in the Scottish Rite. Obviously, I hope this kind of indicates that we're moving into that direction, and any opportunities that we as a Scottish Rite body have the opportunity to implement that technology. Interesting thing we were talking about earlier, you have this program, I believe it's called Passport, right, where you can keep track of the degrees that you've received. Is that correct? Am I on the right page? Yeah. Well, as we get into more Generation Z people that are joining, we don't even know what paper is anymore. How can we find a way to put that online where they can track it based on their phone? That's the type of things that maybe you as Valleys and Scottish Rite should be considering doing. So that's step one. Step two is dependency. I think it's become increasingly known that Generation Z is becoming a more dependent organization or body. Have you ever heard of a website called WikiHow with pictures? Well, WikiHow has all the answers, right? You can see here on the part, it says part one right below the social media. It says part one, being attractive. They have a step-by-step guide on how to be attractive. They have below that, setting yourself up for success. That one's actually about how to ask a girl to prom. I used the internet to find a way to ask my girlfriend to prom junior year. It did work. So let's just take a minute and realize, right? We don't ask our parents for help anymore. We don't or as much help. We do ask them for help. We don't ask our teachers for as much help because we have the internet on our side where you can Google anything and figure out how to do it quick and easy. It's convenient for us, right? So the knowledge that your generations may have only been able to get through the wise experience of those older than you, we can get that online now. So we're becoming an increasingly more dependent organization. And as a Scottish Rite, that might translate into us not asking for as much help as a mentoring program. It might mean we don't ask for as much help memorizing degrees, just because we've grown up in a society where if we don't know the answer, we can sure find it on the internet, right? So dependency is a big part of what we do, and I think we'll hit on that a little bit more throughout this presentation. So this is, I said I was challenging beliefs a little bit, and I think this can be one of those subjects that does that. 73% of Generation Z members support homosexual marriage rights, right? The teenagers that were on social media when the Supreme Court passed their decision last year based on that subject started tweeting this hashtag. And at one point, there were 35,000 teens per minute that were tweeting support for this, right? And I'm not up here today to kind of throw my personal belief at you or to try to influence you politically. All I'm doing is showing you some statistics about Generation Z. Does anyone want to take a guess why Generation Z might feel that way? They know people. Okay.
They bumped into people. Some of their heroes are.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons why. I think the largest reason why we've seen this change for Generation Z people is social media. Has anyone ever seen something funny on Facebook, whether it be a video or a cat photo or something like that, where you've commented on it? Has anyone done that? Has there ever been somebody that you didn't know that also commented on that? Yeah. Have you ever conversed with that person through the comment section before? couple people, a couple nods. Well, that's what we've done our whole lives, right? So we have disassociated people with any kind of traits other than the fact that they're just a person, right? Every person is equal. I'm having a conversation with somebody that I may not know on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram through the direct messaging. And to me, there's no difference between them and any other person. So after you've grown up with that for our entire lives, I think in large part that contributes to the way the Generation Z acts. Everybody is equal. Nobody is different from any other person out there, just because to us, they're a profile on social media. There isn't any substantial thing that separates them. So it's just a belief that everybody should be equal in the eyes. And you can see at the bottom, only 32% of us support affirmative action. I think that ties right along into it. Everybody should be treated equally. We've grown up where it doesn't matter what race you are, who you want to marry. None of that matters to us. Because to us, all we see is their social media profile. All we see is that they thought the same thing was funny that we thought was funny. So we must have things alike so we could be friends. Does that make sense? And 76% are concerned about humans destroying the earth and the environment. Whether or not there's any factual beliefs to that, right? Doesn't really matter. Every single one of us has an opinion in this room about every single one of these issues. And the great part about it, the beautiful part about this, is that none of our viewpoints really matter, right? The only viewpoint that matters is those of the audience that we're trying to appeal to for membership. If we believe that Masonry makes people better, if we believe that Masonry has values that everyone should have in their lives, then our goal should be to find as many good people as possible and get them involved in it, right? So we don't need to be having all these opinions and pushing them on people. If this is what this generation believes, then I believe we have to be willing as a Scottish Rite body to accept those viewpoints, to respect them, and move forward so that we can continue to do what we as brothers do, and that's share values between us that make people better. So, does anyone here believe, by a show of hands, that social media is a truly only positive force for good? Social media only does good things. Right? No hands? Does anyone think it could have some problems with it? Yeah? So here's an interesting thing. Social media has transformed the way that we get news, right? And in large part, what that's done is it's made us realistic in terms of how we think about things. Because we don't always see funny cat pictures on the internet or funny memes or anything like that. We get online, and especially this next weekend or tomorrow, there will be a lot of things on social media that have really grounded us, obviously it being September 11th, that really have ground our personalities to realize that the world isn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? Does that make sense? So there are a couple of areas, a survey was done, a couple of areas that people recognize with most of our generation as things that they're fearful of or the greatest threats to society. Does anyone want to take a guess at what the first one might be? The first one that they reference? Terrorism, close. Columbine school shootings. Are school shootings not on the rise? Do we see that reported on social media every day, right? So a lot of us, when we're in, I'm in school, right? So that's obviously something that I would be wary of just because it could happen anywhere, anytime. Second is 9/11 and terrorism, the threat abroad. 2008, I remember seeing my parents huddled over the financial books. Does anyone else remember huddling over the financial books around that same time period? Right? Does you want to take a guess on what the next one is? I think it was already said. Terrorism. Terrorism in general. ISIS. And then there was one that really caught my attention that kids are fearful for. And I don't think anyone will guess it, but does anyone give it a shot? What's the last thing that kids are really fearful of in this day and age? No, not quite. Acceptance. Close. Pregnancy. I think it's going to surprise you guys. Student loans, right? It's expensive to go to college. Every single person, every single student out there is concerned about their ability to pay for an education, right? So all of these things, all this is meant to show you guys is that, wow, we're a generation that's glued to our phones while social media controls and takes over our lives. We don't just think that the world is sunshine and rainbows. We recognize that it's realistic, because everything that happens, every shooting before it's on the news, it's on social media. I promise it's on social media before it's on the news. We find it and we read about it. So what is that? How has this realism belief influenced us as a generation? And I think it's that number right there, 26%. That statistic is the percentage of Generation Z people that before they finish high school are already out volunteering in their communities in some way or another. Millennials with full-time paying jobs, they're only at 18.5%. So we have seen an immense uptick in volunteering capabilities for people in our generation. And that's in part to a lot of different things. The first being that every kid at school that's trying to get into college now, every single kid next to you has got a 4.0 GPA. So what are you doing to separate yourself? And that's your volunteer hours. That for me, that was DeMolay, was my X factor to getting into colleges, right? So we see more kids that are going out and being a part of volunteer opportunities. So it's become such a focal point to help our community. We see the influence of social media in our lives, that reporting on these tragic things, we see what's on the news, and that makes us believe that we can be a change. Because remember, we also have the internet on our side. So we have this tool that we believe it's helped us in school, it's helped us become dependent. We can solve anything with the internet. If I don't know the answer, I can probably find it on the internet, right? So because of that belief, because of the realism that social media has instilled in us, we kind of believe that we're the change the world has been waiting for, right? We have the answers. And I know every young kid says that, right? We have the answers. But I think in large part, this generation believes we can be a big part of that future and the answer. So if the Scottish Rite can brand itself as, I think, a caring for others organization, if we can continue to go out and make sure that we're volunteering in the communities, if individual valleys are doing that, because it can't just be a jurisdictional effort. If we have valleys that are doing that, going out into the communities, leaving the safety of the valley and going into the community, I think we're going to see an immense uptick in people my age that take an interest in an organization like that. So now we're going to talk a little bit for the next couple of minutes about, we now understand the very basics of what makes Generation Z tick. But how can you, as Scottish Rite Valley, Scottish Rite Masons in a jurisdiction, maybe kind of build up your portfolio a little bit to attract our attention? I stream through massive amounts of data every single day. Different websites, social media pages, and they've calculated that give or take, you've got about 8 seconds to impress me on your website. If I don't know where to go in 8 seconds, it's probably not worth my time. I can find something else on the internet that attracts my attention. So when it comes to about 8 seconds, make sure that it's interested. So this problem, I think, has since been fixed since the first draft of the presentation. But I Googled Northern Masonic Scottish Rite, and you guys see that's the first link, right? That's pretty good. You want to be the first link on Google. But then when I changed up the wording a little bit and typed in Scottish Rite Northern Jurisdiction, now it comes up as scottishrite.org, or scottishritenmj.org, and you see all of the drop downs, how much space it takes up on Google when you initially do that. So there are ways that you can optimize your search results on Google to make that kind of scene a reality. And as valleys, I assume some of you, how many of you have websites for your valley? You should be optimizing your Google search results or finding a Generation Z kid that can help you do that so that you can take up as much space on Google as possible. Because when I do that, if we're doing that 8-second method, I only have 2 options to click through when I Google that, right? So I'm probably not going to scroll down. The first link is always the best link. So when I go to the website, I see home, about us, become a 32nd degree Mason, and then we've got all these different things on the sidebar. We have valleys, degree dates, we can pay dues. And the first question that I have, and I'm especially clarifying, not trying to bag on the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction's website, because I think it's fantastic. All I'm trying to do is raise a little awareness for maybe some areas that we can improve on, especially for you guys in your individual valleys. Where do I go if I'm curious in joining? And I get it. The Scottish Rite's unique in the fact that it appeals to Master Masons, right? Everyone that should already have an understanding of Masonry. But I'm thinking about the guy that just finds out that he has his grandfather was a Scottish Rite Mason, and he wants to join, right? So when I go to this website, where do I go? Do I go to About Us or Become a 32nd Degree Mason? Well, I heard both answers, right? So we need to clarify that. Okay, so I did Become a 32nd Degree Mason. That was where my personal preference was attracted to. And then we run into this problem. What's the problem? Anyone have a guess? There's way too many words for me. We've got this mentality, and I fully admit to this, right? Social media has changed my personality a little bit. I like pictures. People like pictures. They're much more entertaining than paragraphs of words, which, by the way, we read enough of in school, I think. So this is a lot of words. And I think at the end of it, I still wasn't exactly sure where to go. What do I do next? There wasn't an application at the end for me to fill out how to be a 32nd Degree Mason. It didn't mention that here's a link to the Grand Lodges that are in your area that you might be able to go to, right? Oh, it's 8 seconds. I'm already done. I don't have time to go to another link. Right. So how many of your valleys run into the same basic issue, right? Too many words, not enough clarity. So there is this new phenomenon that's going around right now called a landing page. Anyone heard of it? Just right, show of hands, anyone's heard of it? So here's the concept, right? It's super sleek, super simple, and it's meant for people of my age bracket to be able to find, right? So the idea is that you have 2 different websites, right? You've got one for prospective members, kind of like me, and you've got one for people. It's got all your degree dates on it. It's the meat for all the people that are already in the organization, right? That's an example of a landing page. And all it is like, you want to be a part of this, here's your email, we'll send you information on it, right? Pretty simple. Does it look nice? Is it easy for me to get confused on where I'm supposed to go? So this is a good example right here. What if it had 2 buttons on the front of it that said, are you an existing Scottish Rite member? Click here. Or are you a prospective Scottish Rite member? Click here. And if I click on that, maybe it pops up with a different Grand Lodge information that I need to actually apply to be a Mason in the first place, right? Maybe gets you some good PR for your Grand Lodges at the same time as a clear and direct way for me to understand how I go from A to B being a Scottish Rite Mason, assuming that maybe I don't know what Masonry is, right? So again, it's unique in the fact that you guys have an audience that should already know about this stuff, right? But let's make it even easier for them if they don't know about it. Because right now, I'm not sure if we find somebody that wants to be a Scottish Rite Mason because of their heritage or something like that, I'm not sure that we're able to find them a direct route to do that. That's easy and efficient. And then just for a plug, DMLA International, right? It says be a DMLA, be a DMLA parent, or be a DMLA volunteer on the front of it. Every single one of those boxes that you click goes to the exact same thing. Doesn't matter which one you click. It all goes to a same simple contact form that says fill out this information. Once you put your jurisdiction in, so I'm from Arizona, so if somebody was random and they went on and put I'm from Arizona and they hit the send button, it automatically goes to the equivalent of the deputy for that jurisdiction, so then they can reach out and find out how to get that person from A to B. So those are the types of things that I think we should be employing at a Scottish Rite level to help us bring more people from A to B, help better communicate the message of Scottish Rite, kind of get our web influence a little bit higher prestige, rather than just a website where it's difficult for people to translate between I'm interested, but I don't know what to do, and the people that are only there because they already know what they're looking for, whether it be paying dues or degree dates or anything like that. So here's the other, YouTube. It was mentioned on a previous slide. I didn't mention it directly. 54% of Generation Z members visit YouTube over 3 times a day. YouTube is the fastest growing, that and Snapchat. YouTube and Snapchat are the highest growing social media sites right now. YouTube is immensely popular, whether it be from just listening to music videos, whether it be watching tutorials on how to do your math homework. I've done that. Anything along those lines, YouTube is growing in popularity. So what's the first thing? If I'm interested in Scottish Rite, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to Google it first off. Secondly, I might go see on YouTube. It's the fastest growing social media chain. I might go on there and look at what Scottish Rite is. Maybe you have some videos of some events that you guys do. Dag Lally mentioned earlier about some videos that they're putting together for the museum. Maybe I'm looking for something like that to show me a little bit about what you guys do. So when I type in Scottish Rite, the first video that pops up is from a user, Mason Mike, who's sitting in his garage. Mason Mike has a decent video, but he's in his garage and he's just giving a very basic overview of everything Masonically related, right? So the question then becomes, when we're talking about an organization that at its peak had 4 million members, still today has 1 million members, multi-million-dollar organization, do we want to be represented on one of the fastest growing social media chains with one guy in his garage, right? And this is not just a jurisdictional thing. How are your values promoting social media and YouTube services, right? Are there areas of your building or some events that you've taken videos of that you can put together into a kind of promotional piece for kids my age that maybe I want to come to a meeting, or maybe I'm a new Master Mason and I want to come to a Scottish Rite meeting, but because I'm Generation Z and because I have the internet at my disposal, I kind of want to see what I'm getting myself into before I show up. So maybe I Google, New Jersey valleys on Scottish Rite. What's going to pop up if I do that? Is it going to be convincing enough to make me want to come down to the actual valley? So you'll see the second link on there is a brief history of the Scottish Rite. And that's actually an NMJ video, and it's actually really good. It's a kind of cartoon that leads people along. It's got pictures in it. It's kind of interactive. It's animated. The difference is that it's 3 years old, right? So if I'm a Generation Z kid, or if I'm really anybody for that matter, and I see a video that's 3 years old, what questions might you raise about how the organization is still doing? Is it still around?
Is it still alive yet?
Yeah, it's been 3 years and I haven't seen anything new. So one of the most interesting things that I thought about was that as valleys, it's not only about making sure you're posting things, but that you're posting things consistently, that users like myself and other people might find them available. There's a section under Become a 32nd Degree Mason called Inspirational Videos on the NMJ's homepage. I don't know if maybe your valleys have the same basic setup, but we have these, and they're good videos about Scottish Rite Day and things like that. They're here on the website. They're not on the social medias that the kids are using today. Maybe we pick a couple of the best videos out there and see about putting them online, seeing if we get some views on it from the Masons around the country. It also makes it easier to share for social media pages. It's easier to share a YouTube link than email somebody a huge video, right? So that's just something to take into consideration. If your valleys also have videos on their pages, maybe trying to transition that into a social media approach where you can reach Generation Z more closely. So to wrap up, I hope that this presentation has kind of been an eye-opener as to how some people my age act. We might be glued to social media, but there are reasons behind why we do it. We are a generation that has interest in being a part of an organization like the Scottish Rite and Freemasonry. I can attest to that. My friends can attest to that. Every single kid my age is involved in an organization, right? From sports, from youth sports, to masonry or college clubs or organizations, I guarantee every single one of them is involved in something. The job of the Scottish Rite and the job of Freemasonry is to just make sure that we have a public enough image to grab them before they find their niche, before they find that organization that kind of takes them for the rest of their lives. I was lucky because I found Masonry at an early age. I found it through DMLA, which if any of you have any sons that are DMLA age, they should be a member, right? But I was lucky enough to find it, and I hope that maybe this presentation helps the valleys to realize how we can connect more kids my age to the organization. So I'll be available for any questions throughout the day, and I appreciate your time, and it's an honor to be here.